Can you see that the world again can be divided up temporarily into two groups of people, those that live primarily in their head and those that only sort of routinely visit there? It ultimately comes down to a matter of yellow circuit intelligence, but on a wider scale, I can draw you a initial schematic that covers more than just individual intelligence, because there are areas on this planet, parts of life's body, that you have large groups of people, whole communities, known as nations at times, but whole groups of people, that the group of people still primarily are only visiting in a routine, necessary fashion, as it may prove to be, in their heads. Then you have other large groups of people that are living, by and large, in their head. The more you live in your head, the harder it is to look around. In one quite real sense. And as almost always, if you look at it in a certain way through ordinary city eyesight, in the beginning you could think, well, it must be otherwise. The more you lived in the head, the more you would be responsive to awareness, looking around, studying things. And I could take off on that track and sketch out another picture. But speaking at the general level at which people operate, at the middle class, the bell curve direction in which life moves through man, it's otherwise, verbally, describably, that those who live most in their head find it the hardest to look around. Now, if that is a little strange, to say the least, try this. By look around, I'm still referring back to night before last for the time being, of trying to study, try to guard an object or a person was the example I used, if you remember. And I point out that if indeed you're going to try and correctly guard, to protect, to study through a kind of dynamic protection of the object, the person, you would not do the very thing that ordinary intelligence would tell you to do, and the kind of thing that you would want to report to your employer, that yes, the person, the object never leaves my sight. And then, of course, if the object or the person is attacked, then you can say, ordinary intelligence can say quite truthfully, the object never left my eyes, the threat came as a complete surprise. And I point out that the way to correctly guard something, the way to correctly watch it, would be to look around it. Because if you only look at the object, the threat will never be seen coming. The only time you'll see the threat is when it moves into your view enough, into ordinary view enough, that it is already, or within moments, upon the object, upon the protectorate. It's already on it. And so the would-be guardian, the would-be observer can truthfully say, my eyes never left the protectorate, and the threat took me completely by surprise. As it were, it came out of nowhere. And all you're saying is it came out of my field of awareness, which the way to correctly do it is to look around it, not look at the object, or you'll never see the threat coming. Threat, of course, in another sense, being the overlapping. Keeping that in mind, what I'm trying to draw you closer to tonight from that, the more someone lives in their head, the more it seems unnatural to look around. And I was going to give you perhaps a apparent external example that will focus this a bit better. The kind of instructions about look around, if you're going to protect a person or an object, or you're going to, in the most efficient way, to study it. If you told that to a person not normally living in their head, somebody who was more red circuit, that end of the nervous system, they were still grounded and more oriented there, they would not find these instructions at all unnatural. Not even surprising if they'd never thought those words, and they would find it obvious that you tell just a good old red circuit bricklayer that you took away from his job and said, I am the king, want you to watch the prince out here every day. But the thing is, the king has this idea that you shouldn't look right at the prince. We're going to put you up in the highest tower so you got the widest view, and you watch him. But the king pointed out, don't just watch him, watch around him. And you told that to someone not generally living in their head, and they would just find that to be obvious once you told them. Of Whereas you tell somebody who primarily lives in their head that, and they find it extraordinary. And people who live in their head, well, all people do. The more that they find something extraordinary going in a certain direction, once it passes the line of actually being extraordinary to them individually, it becomes worldwide what? Spiritual. Hence, what I was going to say, the example that this may grab some of you, that is the basis of the so-called martial arts taking on a spiritual tone to some people. They did not originate, if we were going to use the Far East, which is normally considered the home of it. None of this is to give you any kind of lesson on the martial arts, but I assume all of you have this much awareness, that right now in the United States, a country, if we're going to divide it into countries, parts of this planet, that this country by and large lives in its head. Not everybody in it by any means, but this country compared to many other countries I could name in other parts of the planet now, this country lives more in its head. There's now the idea, and it's sprang not just from here, but other areas. But at any rate, people now hear the idea of, kung fu or whatever it is, all kinds of martial arts, and then the story that it's to make yourself more aware, and then all these explanations or descriptions that then begin to sound metaphorical at least, that you're not actually fighting another person, you're trying to fight your own clumsiness, you're trying to fight your own fear, that you do not actually engage in combat with another person, you engage in combat with your own unconscious traumas, whatever. The thing is, whipping up on people, doing something physical, or threatening to, now has taken on a physical quality. But I was trying to get some of you to catch this notion, the general direction, that the whole idea is to look around. That is, not live right in your head. And for somebody who does normally live in their head, to hear this takes on an almost mystical, spiritual quality. When you get beyond the realm of what you do naturally, everything seems spiritual. You've got no choice. I didn't say religious now, because you could be an atheist from the city view. But it will take on, you cannot help it. Once it gets past your floor, once that elevator stops, anything past that you hear about, that you suspect, that you have just a flash of a feel for, it will take on a spiritual connotation. You've got no choice. Dressing up and going hi-yi and doing stuff and threatening to hit somebody and rolling and tumbling and doing some kind of gymnastics. It will take on a spiritual quality if it was unnatural to you, no matter what it's called. It would seem, from one view, that this kind of activity right now, and I'm saying this kind of activity, the way I'm doing it would appeal to those living more in their head than otherwise. Is that necessarily the case? A partial aside here, and you people out of town, normally when any group collects, they've got to have a certain common denominator. The bird watchers, library associations, the Girder Society, the anti-Girder Society, and of course all apparent spiritual cults. That is part of people who are not a part of some cult. That is part of their resistance to the cult, as they all seem like, and oftentimes they'll say it. All this group of people, they seem like a bunch of zombies. This mad leader, whoever he was, all he's done is take a cookie cutter, he's brainwashed them, he's deprived them of certain sensory inputs, he's drugged them, and look at them out there on the street, selling water-filled balloons and condoms and other things and flowers. And every damn one of them, you try to talk to them, and they all act alike, they look alike, they all go. But it is not simply that they have been indoctrinated. It is. Better than that, I refer you back, I think, to Shakespeare, wherever he stole it, the birds of a feather. One thing about this activity, when it's done right, I guess we better strike that and say done correctly, and of course strike that because nobody knows what that means. When it's done right, if you look around, you're hard-pressed, if I may understate the matter, to find a common denominator here, because you do not find a whole group of people living in their head exclusively. You don't find a whole group of people not living in their head. You do not find a whole group of people wanting to pay allegiance to some single idea, some single individual, some single organization. That makes it more correct, whether you understand it or not. But then it makes it harder for you to identify yourself or to identify the group as a whole is, are these people actually living in their head? Do they hear everything the way I hear it when he talks about it? When I hear something really good and useful, it seems like some of the other people in here have dozed off. I look around at some of the other people, and I don't even think they heard it. They were looking at their watch. And then some of you even think, well, some people in here, I don't even think really understand anything he's talking about, which is either a frightening or a hilarious possibility, one of which even I am not totally oblivious. That there are people here on the tape that in a sense have no idea. They just gave up very shortly when this started. They got no idea what I'm talking about. And they don't care. The dance goes on. Remember, some time past it's been, I pointed out to you that music, in the full sense of the word, made a fair metaphor for certain purposes, like a real song, a complete song, of having the melody, rhythm, and what am I leaving out? And the tune itself, the words. And you can compare that through the full spectrum of the nervous system, of running from my old yellow circuit end down through the apparent blue, the bridge, and then down into the more nonverbal, the more rhythmic red circuits end of a continuum. It would have to be more like a Mobius strip of a continuum of one person's nervous system, humanity's nervous system. There is a certain rhythm, there is in fact even a certain melody that people can derive from this, even the way in which I'm doing it, and almost be deaf to the words. There's certain of you can hear this another way. Some people can hear the words and be deaf to the melody. It amounts to the same thing. They do not live in their head to such a degree that that seems to be the hook, the stick, the pickle of this thing. And yet there are others that seems to just be right off the bat. They just hear me speak, or they read something I've written before they ever meet me, and they go, he knows it. That's it. And if they had to describe it, I guess they would just have to say, well, I seem to be at least as intelligent as they are, and they never met anybody that way. Plus, when I really get going, when I really wrote a certain way, I put things that they had already suspected, but I put it in such a way that they got to admit, I would have never thought to put it that way. How goddamned clever. But even with them, it's more than that. Well, I wanted those of you that are hearing this to consider that most of you fall within a middle ground that at times you are capable of, and you do live for large periods of time. And I don't mean just measured this way. It can be a certain quality, a certain intensity that you live by and large in your head. But then to be the proper kind of well-balanced, well-rounded mutant, you've got to have the ability to not do so. Because it is not, under all conditions, required that a person, by and large, live at this end of the nervous system. Neither is it absolutely required that you live at the other end, that you would think, for instance, that if you're out running 5 miles a day, that it's not necessary that you think about running. It's not necessary that you think about moving your legs, of course, to start with the obvious silliness. It's not obvious that you think, well, I must breathe in and breathe out. I must not trip. But then you might come to this conclusion that, well, what should I do? Instead of just daydreaming, should I start learning, should I start memorizing poetry? Should I start doing something with my brain as I run? Should I not live so much outside the head? And at the ordinary level of discussing things, that is of no great consequence on that basis. It's not necessary that you be in some direct fashion for that 30 or 40 minutes living to a large degree in your head. It's just not necessary for that particular exercise, for that form of behavior. There is, on a larger scale, again, among other ways to describe this, among other holes through which you might peek, ways to see the apparent continual struggle between two forces of some kind in the world. whether it seems to be economic forces of capitalism and totalitarianism or Marxism, or whether it seems to be political systems, whether it seems to be religious systems, whether it seems to be just the conflicting opinions between people. You can see some of that again through this whole of looking that there are large groups of people, not just individuals, but large groups that can be identified as groups, and group A over here primarily is living in their head. And group B over here, with whom they seem to have serious conflict, is only doing so in a routine manner, as is absolutely necessary. They sort of visit their heads. And you can see that that is the basis, not right or wrong. It is no doubt that I have described for you properly in the 3D scheme of things. Life is moving in the head direction, but it cannot be simply the head direction any more than you can simply be the head direction. You'd be dead. You certainly wouldn't be here. As far as those not living in the head, let me point out something else that might interest some of you. It is again one of the purposes of certain activities that as always are misnamed. Well, they're named correctly in the city, but if you stop there you'll never see any more. Prayer. Who are the big prayers in the world? All right, I'll answer. People who just visit their head. Now all of you know that, don't you? Now in the city it's called something else. They'll say, hey, the more educated you get, there's the danger. You are prone to become an atheist, or at least an agnostic. And that seems to be true, which of course is part of the devilish beauty of the logic of the city. That if you're a good Assembly of God or the Superman Church of God from Alabama, if you don't want your son or daughter to become one of those atheists, one of those non-believers, then do not send them to Harvard or Yale or Princeton. It's dangerous nowadays to even send them to probably the University of Alabama. But there's no doubt, there's statistical proof that some great percentage, way out of the ordinary of the population of people in the world of academia, professors, that a huge, out of proportion majority of them would classify themselves as non-religious. Given the choice between religious or non-religious, they call themselves non-religious. It's always been true. It's nothing brand new. So, of course, in the city, there's the proof. I'm really off on a side track, in a sense. But can any of you realize the devilish beauty of that? Because that's not the reason. It's not the cause either. But it is a fact that those who are sort of head visitors are those who are the most religious in the world. And I was going to give you one of the reasons why. Just one. And they're the ones who pray. You do not find many professors at MIT who pray. They do not fall on their knees and say, oh God, I got this equation I've worked on now for 2.5 years. If I don't get published within the next quarter, I'm out on my ass, as you well know. Would you please? They don't do that. People who live primarily in their head do not pray. Not in the ordinary sense as prayer is known through Islam and Judaism and Christianity and other more crude religions throughout the world. So, what I was going to tell you, one purpose that prayer serves is a kind of focusing of yellow circuit energy temporarily up here, that it forces bricklayers, if they fall into this, that they can go into a place and the minister can really fire up his enjoinder machine and make everybody feel that they have been properly admonished and they feel properly guilty. And he can say, all right, the thing is, fall down on your knees, you bad, bad people, you, and pray to God and say, at least say this. You don't have to be fancy. I know a lot of you people don't have college educations out there. I know you and your families, but at least fall on your knees and say, God, blah, 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 whatever it is. You know, God, give me a break. I'm sorry, I'll do better. Then after a few minutes, part of the fun is that they would never do it, is it runs themselves back up into their head that they've got to, in a sense, focus brain energy, the neural activity. That has been lost by many intellectuals, as I was pointing out. People live in their head, and it keeps resurfacing, and it came back out in the 60s. It's still going on now under other names. It's meditation. Not prayer, but just meditation. and all the benefits, lowers your blood pressure and all that. But what it does is focus their energy in a way that they have lost since they don't pray, and it looks like meditation's doing it. It is a temporary kind of focusing through outside direction. That is, outside energy directs you to do so, seems to push you, seems to cause you, gives you an excuse to live in your head. For people who do not normally live there, or else who do not live there, as I was saying with intellectuals, in a certain manner that prayer provides, and so now it's looked upon, again, well, it's a form of meditation. See, there are always reasons, if you want to call them reasons, that the city can't ever see, that ordinary intelligence never sees. For one thing, if you're fairly intelligent, just up to city level, there are answers for everything. There are answers. I'll stay on this aside because some of you are about to get a glimpse of something else. You got to always look somewhere else, not just what I'm talking about. But there is a city, a reasonable explanation as to why, quote, intellectuals become non-religious. And of course, it's an intellectual description of it. And the description is, well, once you get some education, once you become sophisticated and well-read enough about the history of humanity and what's going on in the sciences and etc., no offense to your family and your forefathers. My father's a rabbi, the professor might say, or the apologist for being an intellectual. He might describe it that way. And he said, but look, once you get intelligent enough, sophisticated enough, the ideas of some old man, a Jehovah, sitting up on a throne and going to blow a trumpet and send down angels and call us home, it simply becomes another form of outdated mythology. And then the intellectuals, that is, people more living in their head who hear that, go, well, that's it, that does describe it, whether I like it or not. And just a slight variation, in fact, will describe it to the good Southern Baptists in southern New Jersey and in Alabama. That you get around too many people who are already atheists, then the very kinds of descriptions they'll give through the hard sciences, through the soft sciences, the historical, as they call it, survey of religion, all they try to do is disprove it. But as far as they're concerned, it's already a fait accompli. They're just reinforcing and showing up their already biased beliefs, their prejudices against gods and religions. And so in the city, it's all explained. But is it? Of course not. I've just given you another description, one that would never pop up in the city, not even by accident, of what's going on. That religion, and specifically prayer, because you cannot have a religion without prayer, you can't have a religion without a God, you can't have a God unless you're going to entreat him in some way, and to do so, you got to do what? You don't mail him a letter and all that. You pray. That is, you have to run up, temporarily at least, and run into the head house and go, are you there? Are you there? Listen, I got problems. And you have to actually try and put your so-called human feelings into words, because God's not going to read your mind. And even though he could, I'm sure that they would say, he's not going to put up that kind of stuff. You've got to actually kneel down or get in whatever position your religion calls for, and you've got to speak up. You've got to say, hey, God, it's me. You know, it's Bucky down here, and I know I hadn't talked to you, but listen, I got a problem, I need your help, and I'm willing to pray for it. You've got to bring yourself up into living in the head more than you might normally do. Since I started off on this tonight, I think it's time, those of you who really do feel that this could be maybe the non-stop crucible of how you exist up until the final day, the rest of you don't have to listen. But I think it's time to tell you a good one. It's just another one of these great coup de maîtrise. I mean, it's one of the great ones. I guess I should have given it to you for St. Quantum's, but here it is. Guilt. And as all of you know, you don't have to even be religious to feel guilty. Everybody feels guilty. And what is guilt? I didn't look it up in the dictionary, but everybody in the city, living in their head or not living in their head, just visitors, everybody could describe guilt throughout the world, because everybody feels guilt. Everybody knows what it is. And everybody would describe it thusly, without any exception, that guilt is that kind of feeling that you have when you didn't do what you knew you should have. That you didn't do it. It's not. And everybody on this planet, everybody, if they were forced to give a response, that would be it. It's the feeling. Of course, it's a feeling of remorse, I guess I'd say, but it's the feeling that you have, that a man has, when there was something he should have done or either not done, same thing, and he didn't do it. That's guilt, whether it be religious, cultural, or just your individual feeling of humanity and propriety toward your fellow creature. And it's not. And it's so beautiful that this is one of the great ones. It's so good, maybe I shouldn't tell you. Maybe I should just leave it there and let you figure it out, except you wouldn't. Here's what guilt is. I'm stalling around because I want some of you to kind of chew on this, because I hope you savor some of the juices when I pull it on you. That little pop in your mouth and in your head, because this is one of the great ones. The way life can do it. Guilt, the feeling that I did not do something I should have done. That is not the basis of guilt. That is not what guilt is. And of course, if I must add one small basic preface again, guilt or anything else you realize is not cultural, not religious, not acquired. It is simply a name put upon certain flows of energy that goes into your nervous system and makes it react a certain way, and then this calls it something. Everybody calls it something. The large group of which you are a part calls it the same thing. Other groups on the life's body may call it something else. But if we could translate it all, everybody knows what guilt is, because every human has that feeling. And they would all say, I repeat one more time, keep savoring and realize the correctness from the ordinary view of what I'm describing. That guilt is the feeling, the remorseful feeling, but the feeling that you have, that a man has, a person has, when he did not do that which he should have done. God, I hate to tell you. It's the feeling that all humans experience. And here's the basis that no one has ever been able to see. The life has never let anyone see it this way. And it's quite clear once you see it. It's the feeling you have of not doing something that you believe, that you think, that you should have done, but it was impossible. The feeling of something that you should have done, but not something that you should have done, but you didn't do. Not something that you should have done, but you were too weak to do at that time. Not something that you should have done, but you just didn't do it. It's the feeling that arises that it's already inbred in you. Of course, apparently, in many cases, you think somebody told me. I was directed, it was told to me that I should do this. Still, your nervous system has absorbed and reacted to that feeling, to those directions, those sound waves, to those light waves that you read. That there was something that you should have done, and yet it proved to be. You know, your nervous system knows it's impossible. That is guilt. Now, troops, can you savor that? Not all of you, obviously. To suffer over, which is another neurological, electrical, chemical, nervous system phenomenon known as suffer, to suffer over the inevitable, the inescapable, while believing that something else would have been possible. But the real basis of guilt is, and no is not the word, of course, but the real basis of it is that your nervous system knows that that thing that this end, the head, is saying, we should have done that and we didn't do it again. The whole nervous system knows it's not that we didn't do it this time, it's not that we were too weak, it's not that we forgot, it's not that we were a sinner, it's that it cannot be done. And non-verbally, every nervous system knows that which that it can do and it can't do. It knows that. I've never put in those words, but you surely realize that. You would do yourself serious damage. It would be mass lemming time for humanity. Life itself would be committing a form of slow suicide. Your nervous system knows what can be done and what can't be done. The few exceptions to that either get put away or they do kill themselves. If you're part of the middle class, the middle of the bell curve of life's nervous system through man that keeps it going in this direction, the nervous system knows what it can do and can't do. And everything that makes every human on this planet, regardless of race, religion, sex, creed, nationality, the reality of what makes everybody feel this thing called guilt is that the nervous system believes at one end, in one particular area, that there are things that should be doing or not doing that are impossible, and the nervous system knows they're impossible. The nervous system in toto knows this cannot be done. Not that I didn't do it this time, not that I can practice to do it. This thing cannot be done. You still don't savor the beauty of it. And so men are left with a feeling that guilt is the suffering over, and most likely with most people, the proper suffering and remorse over me not doing that which I should. And the tacit part, of course, being that I could. Because who's going to demand that you do something that you can't do? Right? Well, nobody except one person, if you want to call it a person. Popes, rabbis, your parents, your best friend, even you wouldn't do that to you, right? Taxi, we got to turn the tape over. Well, I consider it such a gift that I don't think I'll say any more about what guilt is. Yeah, I will. Those of you that were not struck by this, would you trust me again to really apply yourself to remembering this for the next few hours or days? Because everybody feels guilty. I don't care if you were born and raised an atheist. You feel guilty. You may not even like that word. And we can come up with a sentence, but you feel guilty. You don't do enough. You sleep too much. You don't sleep enough. You eat too much. You don't eat right. Everybody feels guilty, but it's always on the basis, whether it be religious or apparently self-induced, on your own philosophical basis of how a proper person should live. It's all on the basis that there's things that I should be doing, a certain thing, and I did not do it. But everywhere, from any apparent source, whether it apparently arises from you or whether it came from religion or your upbringing, the unspoken part is that you can do it. You may be weak, you may be a sinner if you're religious, you may be cut off from the sources of the great cosmic good, but you can do it. You were too weak. You forgot, you slipped, you fell by the wayside, you just didn't do it. And that's not it. That's not even close. There are no shades of variations in this of what I'm telling you now, besides what people say of, I was telling you about the nervous system believing it could learn to do something. It knows what it can do and what it can't do. It's not its terms, because it's never talked about it. But the things the nervous system is told to do that produces guilt in you, your nervous system knows it cannot be done. And those of you that may still think that this is too obtuse or you're missing the whole point, there are things that you have been told that you should feel guilty about, or the person that should do, that may or may not have been part of your religion or upbringing, but think about this, if this will help for a second, that just don't strike you at all. That you hear about it, that some religion, or large numbers of people, some of your friends say, listen, there's one thing that I believe in philosophically, if not religiously, is that a person should do so-and-so, and it strikes you as just being moot. just absolutely irrelevant to anything, then you can't feel guilty over it. And it also is something else. It means that you could possibly do it. But if you feel guilty about it, I don't care what it is, and I don't care what your head has told you, that yeah, I believe. Never mind where I picked this up, but I fully believe that a person should do so and so. And that's plagued me all my life, and I'm not strong enough, I forget it, but I believe that, and I'll die believing that. You're saying one thing, your nervous system, not you and your head, not you and your personality, your nervous system is expressing the absolute unconditional reality that you cannot do that. You'll never do that. You can't learn to do it. You can't pray to do it. You can't trick yourself. You can't hypnotize yourself. You can't take drugs and do it. It cannot be done. That is the beauty. That is guilt. And do you see that it's better, not worse, it's better than being antipodal to it. It's not the diametric opposite of it. No. No. Hell, Walt Disney could do that. It goes off at what I keep calling a right angle, which doesn't cover it. But look at the opposite of it, comma, and then go off at a right angle to the opposite of it. Or if you're really good, turn the coin from one side to the other and stop at the edge and go off at a right angle to the edge. That's how good this is. It's the kind of thing that would make the right kind of would-be revolutionary want to say, golly, Sergeant God. Golly. You did it to me again. Well, since I said I wasn't going to say much more, then I'm not going to say a whole lot more after that than I normally do. Can you see the kind of inherent motivation, widespread energy in this throughout humanity? That everyone believes, to varying degrees, that they're not operating exactly as they should. Guilt. As they should. But the as they should implies, and in the head, that in the nervous system, be it come out in religious words, but it come out in philosophical verbiage, that we could, I could, maybe I don't know whether I ever will, but not only should I could. It is possible. Do you see the inherent, the inescapable beauty? It is a symmetry of justice from which none can escape. Even death won't get you out of it. But that's another story. Because there are people who feel guilty about dying. That no one on this planet feeling guilty can do, I'm telling you unconditionally, no one can do that which the failure to do so makes them feel guilty. None can do it. Now, if you don't think that's beautiful, you do not have an artistic turn of the eye. You do not have an artistic turn of mind. If you do not see the beauty in that, because I said it's even more perfecto than me saying, all right, everybody believes that you feel guilty because you don't do things that you should do, that you could do. Whereas, ha, 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 you've been fooled, it's just the opposite. It's not just the opposite. That'd be funny enough. But this is funny beautiful. This is not just funny. It's funny beautiful. Something else I want to run back to. I shouldn't say run back to, because then some of you think, well, wait a minute, if we've heard it all before. If you hadn't heard it all before, I wouldn't have said, I'm running back to it. I'm not running back to it. I'm running sort of back to where it was some time back, but it's too late. It's gone. But some of you will think, well, the background landscape, if this is a cartoon, I think I recognize those panels. You may think you recognize the panels, but what's going to go on up front is a whole new thing. If that ain't Disney, at least that's Hanna-Barbera. It's this. You remember I was talking to you some time back, and I was pointing out that all humans, they do it individually to themselves, and of course they do it once you've got two humans, and then when it gets bigger, it becomes geometrical expansion of what seems to be structures, institutions, bridges between people, systems. And it's a kind of protection. But specifically, I want to try to narrow your attention down. Another one of the great variation of one of the great binaries I pointed out, you have got not only actions, let's say goals, but you got that, and you've got the plans of actions, which become the plans. You can look at that as being the attempted systems, the institutions even, related to what should be the actions themselves. There was once, well, first let me point, I was going to give you a real specific example, something connected with this. But how about, everywhere you look, the world's full of this. I shouldn't have to prove this to you, but right now, 1988, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, back trying to overcome the setbacks of the Challenger fiasco and crash a couple of years ago, had set up a whole thing, whatever it's called, the NASA Safety Committee. As always, they had somebody in Washington, whoever was holding the purse strings. They put together a blue ribbon subcommittee to first select people to set up a whole new section. That's what I mean by committee, a whole new division down at NASA to do nothing but oversee safety. Am I right? I am right. And that's come out just recently, last few days. They began to little things pop up that somebody points out to the committee, this division, that hey, we got some additional or some problems we believe with certain gaskets, certain little parts over here that we've got to look into. This new division, the safety division, the safety committee, the safety system, the safety institution, you understand? It's a whole new thing set up within NASA to oversee safety. Their reaction, this is not ironic. You know, to believe that you see conflict in life and stupidity in life, to believe that and to be critical, you're blind. To believe that what you see, this kind of conflict and stupidity, isn't somehow ironic, you're blinded twice. I mean, you're so blind, I hate to be in the same room with you because it is not ironic. But the committee, how do they respond to this? Their concern is over their reporting procedures. I'm not making this up. They have insulated themselves, the committee, since it was formed. It's been at least, I guess, 18 months that they had the Challenger disaster, and then they set the committee. And so someone sat at a desk responding to these new allegations. And they weren't just allegations, it seemed to be almost a certainty, but there was certainly the possibility of some serious problems coming with some new parts that the committee should have covered. And so then the head of the committee, they had him on television, and there he sits with what they've done in 18 months. It was about this thick, and they've got a full name for it. It has numbers behind it. It's registered somewhere in NASA, and everybody refers to it. And it's all the procedures to check anything possibly that could go wrong so that another Challenger would never happen. And so now it's brought out that on some related equipment, it's believed that there has been some faulty materials put into this new rocket that they didn't catch. Regardless of this, in 18 months of some of the best minds in the business, and the head of the committee, the head of this new division, his response, his concern is over the procedures of reporting, not safety. But I've told you that before. The purpose of anything from a NASA safety committee to the Catholic Church, the Judaic religion, the actual purpose of the system, the institution, the plans, are not what they're purported to be. Never. And it happens all the time that just all over the world forever, little groups of people form a community. They become a community. It just seems to be organic growth. And they try to sort of look after each other, and they try to guard one another's house and look after each other, and they try to decide, let's everybody, instead of throwing garbage out behind our house, all throw it in a pit. The day comes that they decide what we should do. In the Western world, they refer to it under our judicial system as let's incorporate, apply to a larger, the state here in America, and get incorporated as an actual little city with a name, and then we'll hire our own police department, we'll hold elections, we'll set up a garbage system. And without fail, this is just, people know this. Out in the world, life is like, some people know this, they look at it and they stare at it, and then they have to look off and go, no, it can't be. They incorporate, that is, they set up their own new system that we're now a town, and what little benefit they were getting, like of throwing their garbage all in the same place, and they sort of watch each other's house. The crime rate goes up, garbage does not get collected better. They have new problems. The garbage people want to unionize, the police want to unionize. Garbage does not get collected. They have not only the problem what to do with the garbage or with crime, now we got the problem how are we going to pay the police, how are we going to deal with the union, this garbage man. Once the thing takes on this kind of institutionalized reality, the object, the apparent goal, what should have been the original actions, kiss them goodbye, send them off with Columbus in a leaky ship. And it's not ironic, it's not stupidity, it's the way life works. There is a way, well, let me give you the specific, no, let me say something else before I give you the specific example. Because some of you may take this personally, as you should. Both, remember the two correctnesses, the external and the internal, that you need to see that they're both existing. In my kind of examples of a NASA and a safety committee or a little group of community incorporating into their own little town with their own systemized infrastructures, all the way from that to what goes on inside of a person with this apparent division into partnerships and different people running this gamut of this nervous system. And there apparently being different entities in there, at least different unincorporated areas with different interests, conflicting interests at times, it seems. Then these bridges, these structures that get built, such as let's set up a committee, let's actually incorporate our community into a real town. This, in a sense, is a kind of bridge between actions, goals, and the plans to move toward the goals. And the bridges, in effect, they act like protecting layers of fat between the plans and between the attempted execution of the plans, but not for some dumb, stupid reason, and not through man's unthinking behavior. And this is not the only reason, but this is one I want to point to tonight. These kind of bridges, infrastructures, systems that just organically arise, which, once they're in place, their purpose is not the stated purpose for which they were organized, for which they seem to grow. They will never accomplish it. They cannot. Acting as a protective layer of fat between the one and the other, one of the reasons is it keeps any particular stream, any creek, any line of energy running from reaching an untimely end. That is a conclusion. Now, I've talked around the edges of this, but I thought maybe if I sneaked up on some of you, you'd see it. Any religion cannot accomplish, psychiatry cannot accomplish, education cannot accomplish what it purports to accomplish. The people involved are not dumb. Well, they're no dumber than anybody else. And it's not a conspiracy by the professionals, by the people involved, and it's not simply ironic. It is an unrecognized law of physics. It is part of the topology of life that once these kind of insulating layers of fat, this kind of protective element between actual action toward a goal, that there's really no middleman. But once you have set up any kind of infrastructure, any kind of bridge, any kind of gap, any kind of systematic approach to it, for one thing, you're ensuring that that particular line of energy is not going to come to an untimely end. That is, psychiatry is not going to heal everybody that life has made believe, listen, I'm so guilty, I'm mentally ill, can you help me? Yes, we can. No, they can't. Or we can talk about degrees, and people say, yeah, I feel better. Are you cured? No. I feel real guilty, and I feel like I am in some way split off from the great cosmic forces, the gods. I hear your church is in charge of such things. Yes, we are. Can you cure me? Can you heal it? They may or may not insinuate yes or no. But you know the fact. They cannot. If they could, it would self-destruct. That is, I've said that before, it's not simply that the Catholic Church, to use one instance, that if everybody became a good Christian, that suddenly the church would go out of business. It would, but that's not the point. The line of energy, that stream of energy that runs through what seems to be, in toto, the full dynamic of feeling guilty and wanting to be a Christian. In other parts of the world, they feel guilty and they won't be a Muslim or a Jew or a Buddhist. But this particular line, if the Catholic Church, if any Christian church worked, you understand that line of energy would suddenly just run into the ground and just peter out. It'd be done for. Now, the day may come that that happens, but it'll simply be the same way life will have extincted the church the same way it did dinosaurs. Man didn't kill dinosaurs. Carbon monoxide didn't kill dinosaurs. Men do not kill animals now. Man does not extinct animals off this planet. Life extincted them. Life had no further use. It got to a certain point, and that animal, that plant, it happens with plants nowadays. Humans take it personally. It's tied into something else, and you all know that men say, well, we're destroying the planet and blah, blah, blah. If a plant or an animal, if something actually disappears, if it becomes extinct, it was a line of energy. It was serving a purpose that is no longer germane to what life is doing. The systems, the institutions, the division, the kind of bridge, the kind of segue, I could call it all sorts of things, that go between, you start off, and apparently you or a group of people come up with a goal, the intent. Like NASA was to make space flight safer. And they set up, that's the goal. And so to do that, they set up some kind of either system, you can call it that, you can call it an institution. It is a bridge. It is apparently efforts to execute the goal. But it is not. It becomes its own entity. The people involved with the safety committee, their concern is over the committee, over its procedures. How could this slip through our hands? We're going to have to institute inside of our committee a subcommittee to look into this. They're not doing anything about safety. They say, well, nobody even, the guy does not talk about, wait a minute, we're concerned about pulling that rocket off. We can't send it up if indeed there's even a possibility that that little O-ring or that gasket, somebody else has to do it, not the safety committee. Their concern is for the man to lean on this big old huge thing and to look concerned, and he is, and to play intelligent like, I cannot believe the kind of people I appointed. We had some of the best minds in this country. I'll take responsibility. We're going to have to look into this. I don't care if it takes another 18 months. This can't happen again. He's not talking about we can't have this kind of faulty piece go back in. No. He's saying we cannot let this kind of faulty piece go in and it not be noticed by this committee. That's what he's saying. But do you see, it keeps it going. It keeps life alive in certain areas. So I was going to point out, for those of you that won't take it personally, it's sometime in the last, let's just say a few years, I had a group of people in another city. They just kind of stumbled across each other. People ordered books. I had appeared there or something. Anyway, it was another city, and it ended up with a small handful of people writing me, wanting to know if I'd come out there, whether I could send them tapes. They heard about the tapes. And so I gave them, as I have done in the past, I said, all right, we're making the videos, and I admitted it, you know, we've got these. And if you will come up with X number of people that seem to be interested, give them, I sent them out some books, or they already had books, and I said, let them look them over, the outlines or something. And if you really think that if you end up with X number of people that will say they'll come there once a week or twice a week, until further notice, no obligation, they'll actually be there that think they won't hear this, then I'll send you the tapes. But you got to get that many people out, you're just not going to fool with it. And they said, oh yes. Now a handful, several of them came here to meet me personally, and want to be sure that I gave them, that they could come see your grace, and then say, yes, do it, and I'll send you the tape. You know, good boys, good girls. They went to all that trouble, came here and did that, and said, all right, we'll be back in touch with you. Went on for months, almost got to be a year with this one particular case. And they would send me reports. And the more they sent me reports, at first I didn't respond to it, I just read what the report was. I finally had to begin responding. And I tried to point out to them what they were doing. Never saw it. They took, the goal was, as far as they were concerned, and I specified it for them. What they wanted was access to this, they thought. At least through the tapes. And so I set out the goal. Their goal originally was, let's get the tapes. And I just gave the condition, all right, to get the tapes, you got to get X number of people to agree to be there. And they said, got it. Got it, God. Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. For months, as I said, almost a year, they did everything but that. They had meetings. They sent me back. They would meet at times 5 times a week. And they would take turns sending me back, typed, detail, what time they started, who said what. Then they began to formulate plans. They were going to reprint what few things that they'd ever found that I had written. Those books that I did publicly. Then they came up with this grand plan. Wait a minute. They've never been distributed by a major company. So then they set up a committee that they're going to get some major publisher interested. No, if they did, you're talking about over a year's time. And I gave them that they had to do this. Well, then it was less than a year. I said, either do this or don't bug me anymore. They set up that kind of committee. Can you see from a... This is no attack on the people individually. But insofar as the goal is concerned, do you see that they were working, sweating bullets, meeting, setting up subcommittees, doing everything but getting other people? But do you see what a sly devil is the influence, if I may understate it, life has on people?